In Bekasi, Indonesia, the timeline of a disaster started with a single error. A taxi driver stalled his vehicle across an active, unmanned railway crossing. This timeline highlights the mechanical failure that followed. The commuter train hits the taxi and stops. But commuter and long-distance trains operate on separate control systems. Because of a critical communication delay, the incoming express train is never warned. As you can see, the resulting collision is catastrophic. The heavy diesel locomotive plowed into the stationary commuter line, tearing 10 meters deep and violently crumpling the steel frame inward. The geography of this specific crash made it uniquely devastating. The express train struck the very rear of the commuter line, which, as the signage shows, is a dedicated carriage reserved exclusively for female passengers. 2 hours later, the rescue effort is completely fractured. Paramedics from different hospitals are arriving, but no one is in charge. Civilians are tripping over power cables, and there is absolutely no medical triage system in place. Then, Dr. Mohammed Iqbal El Mubarak arrives. He is an off-duty surgeon who heard about the crash on his drive home. Seeing the leadership void, he immediately steps in and begins directing the medical teams. His focus turns deep inside the compacted wreckage of that rear carriage. 5 women are pinned alive under the heavy steel. Extracting them requires someone trained in austere disaster medicine to keep them stable while the heavy machinery does its work. Surviving the sheer kinetic force of the initial impact was only the first hurdle. Now these trapped women are locked in a deadly waiting game against their own failing biology. The immediate priority for the rescue crews is structural. They have to carefully clear the overhead debris so the jagged metal ceiling doesn't collapse and crush the victims below. Meanwhile, the extreme physical and psychological stress is rapidly draining the women's glucose levels. They start becoming drowsy, slowly slipping out of consciousness. This animated breakdown of the circulatory system illustrates the deeper physiological threat: hypovolemic shock. Severe physical trauma causes blood and fluids to pool or leak out of the vessels. When that happens, blood pressure crashes and vital organs start starving for oxygen. Iqbal has to improvise fast. He sends volunteers to find local candy to immediately spike the victim's blood sugar, and he threads IV lines into their arms to pump in fluids and artificially stabilize their blood pressure. These IV fluids buy the women critical biological time, but they are still encased in a suffocating environment that is actively poisoning them. Inside the compacted carriage, the heat is stifling, the humidity is rising, and the air is thick with toxic diesel fumes leaking from the ruptured express locomotive. To prevent asphyxiation, rescuers rig a crude ventilation system. They borrow a canvas fire escape chute, attach it to electric fans, and funnel breathable air directly into the wreckage. Getting the women out requires slicing through compacted steel. To reach them, crews have to use heavy hydraulic shears to pry the metal apart, millimeter by millimeter. But they hit a biological wall. Every time the heavy machinery shifts the metal, the victims experience agonizing pain. Instinctively, they tense their muscles and physically resist the rescuers, completely halting the extraction. To break the stalemate, Iqbal makes a highly dangerous call. He decides to administer general anesthesia in the field. Sedating trauma patients outside of a controlled operating room is incredibly risky, as you can easily compromise a patient's airway in the dark. But it works. The medication forces their bodies to go limp, relaxing their muscles enough for the rescuers to finally pull them free from the twisted steel. At 7:25 a.m., more than 10 hours after the initial collision, the 5th and final victim is pulled from the wreckage. Dr. Iqbal is finally able to go home. 16 people lost their lives in the crash. The 5 women pinned in the rear carriage survived, specifically because an off-duty trauma surgeon took control of a completely uncoordinated scene. The official emergency response was alarming. The designated search and rescue teams weren't formally dispatched. They only found out about this mass casualty event through a casual WhatsApp group nearly 30 minutes after it happened. Look at this image of the dense Jakarta skyline. It highlights the broader infrastructural gap exposed by the crash. The region's rapid engineering and rail development has completely outpaced the growth of its emergency medical command structure. As Iqbal later pointed out, a developing transit network cannot rely on the sheer luck of a passing doctor. If a city is going to build modern transit systems, it has to build robust disaster protocols to match them.